Welcome to the Vitalistic Voice. I'm Dr. Colin Elkin, and I can't tell you how excited I am for this interview this morning. I am very fortunate and very grateful to have the one and only Dr. Irene Gold with me this morning. And I just got to say, I know that Dr. Irene is so busy in the things that she does for the chiropractic profession. I know she doesn't have a lot of time to do these types of interviews, so I feel extremely fortunate this morning to have her with me. Dr. Irene, thank you for being with us.
I am retired.
Yes, you are retired. Yes.
I don't work every day, less hours. Okay, that's my retirement.
Oh my goodness. Well,
Well,
no problem. That's
yeah,
fine.
I'm 89 years old this month. Not this year, rather.
You're
But
89 years this year, 89 years young. And so I just want to ask you first of all, because I know you are as busy as anybody I know in this profession. So tell us a little bit about your current commitment to chiropractic and what is it that you're doing right now?
okay. 5 years ago, I sold my business and I retired. And now I only take care of people who have had difficulty passing the tests. Some people have been out of school for 10 years. Some of them have failed this test 8 and 10 times before, want to get on with their life, want to have a chiropractic career, and can't because of this test. So I have decided to teach all parts of the national board, 1, 2, 3, 4, and PT, even though I haven't taught part 1 in 35 years, and I've never taught PT, but I have to get these people through the test so they can have a life. So that's what I do now. I don't take everybody. I only take the people who need me.
Well, that's amazing. And I know we communicated last week and you said that you were busy every day, including Sunday. You had that many students that you were teaching and coaching.
Yes, well, I was preparing a group of 6 people to take the test that was given last weekend, and it takes me 6 full days to do it. They come in at 9 o'clock in the morning, they leave about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and they get about 15 minutes for lunch. That's as much as I give them. So make sure that they understand the information well enough to be able to pass the test. By the way, I don't charge anybody any money for that. I just do it.
Wow. I'm so impressed. And so can I ask you, why do you think that students going through chiropractic school and then they get to their board exams, if we would assume that chiropractic school prepares them for their board exams, why do you think that some students struggle to pass the board exams?
For the most part, they are people who have English as their second language. And it's not that they don't understand the question. The way the question is written makes it very difficult for them. Some of them, it's because they don't know how to study, and they have to learn how to do that. And all other kinds of injury, um, family problems, things get in the way. There's a whole bunch of reasons why. But it's not because the school doesn't teach you. The schools do as best they can. It's up to it's up to the student to learn. That's their obligation when they go to school.
Sure. Yeah, that's fantastic. I'd love to ask you some questions, and I'm going to tell our viewers, I had the privilege of meeting you a few years ago, and it was through Max Living, you coming to seminars with Dr. Cohen and Dr. Cordero. And I'm going to tell you, Dr. Irene, it was the best experience in my whole chiropractic career was actually the first time that we met and we went out to dinner together and we sat beside each other at dinner and I was just picking your brain through that dinner and you were telling me some stories and some history and I'd love to rehash some of those stories if you wouldn't mind. Would that be okay?
Lots of stories. You live
So,
long, get lots of stories. Sure, go right ahead.
yeah, you are such a great storyteller. So I want to ask you, let's go way back to the beginning. You were a nurse Can you tell us a little bit about that experience, about being a nurse and then first meeting Dr. Reggie and your transition from the medical community into chiropractic?
Well, when I graduated from nursing school, I went to work as a public health nurse first, and then I worked at the school. I've done kinds of nursing, and I met Reggie in 1958. And that's when I learned about what chiropractic was all about. As a result of that, I went to many, many chiropractic lectures, meetings, social events. So for the first 13 years that we were together, that's what I did. I worked in the office. I did interviews with the patient. I discussed why they should be chiropractic patients for the rest of their life, that they were not coming here for symptoms. They were coming here to make sure that their brain stayed attached to the rest of their body so that they could function at their maximum for the rest of their life. That was my goal in doing that. So that's what I did through all of those years. And I got to the point where it was hard for me to give medical advice because I was in the medical field when I knew it was wrong. I had to get out. That was one of the reasons I left. Not the only reason, but it was one of the reasons that I left.
So would you say, who was the biggest influence on you in really understanding and owning the principle? Because I know you own the principle of chiropractic as deeply as anybody I know. Who was the biggest influence on you? Would you say it was your late husband, Dr. Reggie?
Of course. I wouldn't have known anything without him.
I remember you telling me a story about you having a headache at one time.
A
Do you
what?
remember that? A headache. Remember you told me a story about you having a headache and you reached into your purse to grab a couple of aspirins.
First going out, we've been going out for about a month or so, and I took an aspirin out of my purse to take the aspirin too, because I had a headache at the time. And Reggie said to me, if you ever do that again, that's the end of our relationship. That was it. So I never took another aspirin. That's actually what happened.
Wow.
1958, December 1958.
That's amazing. And so tell us a little bit about when you finally decided to go to chiropractic school, where did you go and how was that experience?
Okay, there were a number of things that happened that made my decision. First of all, the reason I didn't go to chiropractic college for a long time is because I didn't think that intellectually I was smart enough to do it. Okay, that was my concept. Then what happened was I was having this problem with school and I had to give medical advice when it wasn't really the right thing to do. And then there was a point at which they were going to change the position that I had. By the way, at the time I was making this, I was actually a student at NYU in New York, studying for my PhD in school administration. That's what I was doing. So in April of 1971, I went to the first DE meeting I ever been to. Reggie was the speaker. I had never been there before. And at the meeting, an 18-year-old woman from Michigan got up and said, I am going to make this chiropractic my career for the rest of my life. I am making a commitment to this whole audience that I'm going to do that. And I thought to myself, and I can't do that. On my way home in the plane, I told Reggie, I'm going to chiropractic college. Okay, so that was the defining. By the way, her name was Linda Elwitowski, or Linda Elwit, they called. Okay, she was from Michigan, and her whole family is involved in chiropractic and was there at that time. So that's when I decided to do it. Now, I lived in New York. I lived 1 hour away from the chiropractic college. At the time, it was called Columbia Institute of Chiropractic, run by Dr. Irene Gold. And I said to myself, it doesn't matter which school I go to. I already know what this chiropractic is. So I can go anywhere. I didn't have to go to a school that really understood chiropractic and taught it like Sherman did. I went to New York because it was closest for me. And what an experience that was. I walked in with knowledge of chiropractic, and the people teaching me didn't know, didn't have the same concept that I did, didn't have the same understanding, didn't have the same commitment that I did prior to going to school. So I made myself, it was a tough situation. At one point, Dr. Napolitano actually called me in the office and asked me to leave. I was such a disaster. I was creating so much controversy in the classroom that he actually asked me to do that. And I thought about it, and I did go out to Palmer and check it out, and I would have lost 2 years. I didn't want to lose 2 years. I had one more year to go. You know, I wasn't going to do that. So instead, we made a deal, he and I. Okay, you're going to stay, you're going to keep your mouth shut, and you're going to teach here at the same time. So he gave me 2 classes to teach. So I became, don't forget, I had already had my master's degree in education before I went to chiropractic college. So I already had teaching experience. Now he gave me the job of teaching. So that's how we got through the last year.
Wow. Wow. So you, and I know you and of course Dr. Reggie were very involved with DE and Dr. Sid during those, early years. And I
Really?
remember
Not,
you
no,
telling
that's not true. That's not true. Reggie was a speaker for DE for about 4 or 5 years,
me.
4 times a year. But I never went. I was never involved. That was my only visit to DE.
Mhm.
At one time. That was it.
I do remember you telling me though that you got to communicate, you got to meet and have discussions with BJ Palmer. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I never I came into chiropractic uh, in 1958. And my first visit to Davenport, Iowa was 1960 Lyceum, in which BJ Palmer was the speaker. It was the most exciting experience I have ever had in chiropractic. There were thousands of people there, thousands, in a tent, in a great big tent. Didn't have the buildings, in a great big tent outside. And it was absolutely thrilling. So I met him, but I never had discussions with him because that's the only time I saw him.
One thing that you mentioned when we were having dinner is you had experienced the impact of BJ, and BJ had said something to you and Dr. Reggie, and you said, I remember you saying that this was very impactful for you, that BJ said that because you were in the chiropractic profession, you have to give back. Do you remember that?
Not direct, I wasn't giving me directly. This is what happened. If you were a student at Palmer College at the time that BJ Palmer was president, he let you know that whatever happened, you had to get back to chiropractic. In other words, Reggie came out of school not knowing that it was for him. It was so that he could give back to the profession. That's how that came about. It wasn't done direct, it was done through him. And everything that happened in the time that they were all students. Now, keep in mind, Sid Williams was a student at the same time. Okay, Tom Gelati was a student at the same time. They were all in school at the same time. So they had this commitment, give back to chiropractic. That was, I don't know, was almost like part of their education.
So it just shows how powerful that time was for our profession and the influence that BJ had on so many
Oh,
people
yeah.
in building up leaders.
Yeah.
Wow. So can you tell us a little bit about the time, a little bit about the history? So obviously, going into practice and then the transition into the growth and the birth of Sherman College.
I was 1 year short of graduating from Columbia Institute of Chiropractic when Reggie made the decision to leave New York and go to Spartanburg, South Carolina, and help with Tom Gelati starting the school. I was still in school. So he left. And I stayed with a friend of mine for a year because I had to finish. I wasn't going to wait until Sherman College caught up to me and then graduate from there. I wanted to get my diploma. So I graduated 1 year later, and I went down to Sherman, and I tried to get a license to practice, and I could not. The political situation was such that neither Reggie nor I could get a license. And I'm not going to go into the politics of why that happened. That's not important. But that's what happened. It took me 3 tries to pass the test. 3 tries. My first test, they showed me a picture of a knee. I never looked at a knee in school. I had no clue what I was looking at. And they asked me all questions about the knee. That was my test to get a license. So anyway, I failed that test. Only that part of it. By the way, I had to take national boards. They didn't accept national boards. I took all the written tests in national boards, microbiology, chemistry, everything written. No A, B, C, or D, right? All written. So anyway, I failed that test. Next test came around and they gave me a test on DD's work in X-ray from his book from 1910, right? I didn't know what they were talking about. I didn't read that book. I thought X-ray was going to be real X-rays. They didn't do that. So I failed it again. So the third time I took it, the instructor actually called me ahead of time and said, "Oh, by the way, you passed. Do you want to know what you got?" And I said, "Really, I don't really care." He told me I got a 96. So I don't care.
Wow.
But by that time, we were already, I was teaching at the school. I was teaching at the school at the time. And then the time came up for class number 1 to take the boards. And another teacher in the school, his name is Gil Rodriguez, he and I were both teachers at the school. And he came to me one day and he said, "You and I are the 2 best teachers in the school. Why don't we put on a program to get these people through? Let's put on a review." So we did a 6-week review program for 53 people who signed up with us. 3 of them passed. 3 people passed. First time we did it. 3 people passed.
Wow.
Went back to look at why did they fail? What happened here? And I'm not going to tell you all the details because I don't want people to know what happened, why they failed. But anyway, figured it out, rewrote the entire program, did it again 6 months later. And we had 186 people in the class. Now you might want to wonder, why would 186 people sign up with us when 53 of them couldn't pass? But we were the best teachers at the school and they had no hope without us. 3 people failed. And 186. 3 people failed. So that's when people started calling other people, and then they would have people call and say, "Well, can I come over?" And we had people flying in from New York, from California, from all over the place. And that's what happened the entire time I was there until 1978 when I left. That's what was going on. And we developed this whole program, figured out a way. Now, since I wrote that program, I don't do that anymore. I have rewritten the program and I rewrite the program every time I give a test. So that takes time and work.
Sure.
And hours of work.
Sure it does.
That's what I do.
Wow. So when did the Irene Gold course actually start? Your company that you now have sold, but when did that actually come to fruition?
I left Sherman in 1978. I incorporated and decided to, because by that time I had developed a relationship with Life College and also with New York. So I had an opportunity to have 3 classes: New York, Sherman, and also Atlanta. And so that's when that happened. That was 1978 when I left. Started that, and that's an interesting story too. I went to the bank. First of all, I had somebody help me. Okay, I went to the bank and I asked for $5,000 to start the program. Okay, I said, I think I can pay you back in 6 weeks after the program is over, because it was all cash rate. So that's it. And I said, okay, no problem. This is the bank. Tell your husband to come in here and sign the note. I said, no, you didn't understand me. It's not his program. It's mine. And they said, yes, we understand that, but we do not give money to women. 1978. If you want this money, you have to have your husband come in and sign the car or sign something over to us. That's what he said. And if you say anything outside of this bank, I'll deny it. I took the money, $5,000. I paid it back 5 weeks later. 6 months later, the guy I was working with wanted to leave. I needed $5,000. I needed to pay him off. I went back for the $5,000. Same deal. Tell your husband to come in and sign this note. I had no way to get it except like that. 6 months later, I have another class coming up. The bank calls me. How much money do you want? I said, nothing. I don't need you anymore. And that was the end of it. So that's when, and then the next thing I knew, I was being called the Davenport people in LACC from all over. And the students called me and said, come, we can't pass. Come out. And that's how I got started with this all. I had no idea I was going to do this. I was going to get a license. I was going to go into practice. And it never happened. But don't forget, I am trained as a teacher. I went to Columbia University. I have my bachelor's and master's in education, right? From that. So I probably was one of the few teachers in the whole country with a teacher's diploma prior to even going to chiropractic college. So not that that means anything, because I really didn't learn anything till I started teaching.
So at its biggest point,
Yeah.
how many teachers did you have working with you or working for you, and how many students in the program?
I had 18 teachers. I had probably pretty close to 3,000 to 4,000 at any given time. I think in the years gone by, I think that the vast majority of the chiropractic profession went through. I mean, I've had chiropractic presidents in my class.
It's amazing. You've made such an advance in the profession, in the teaching model, really to be admired. I want to ask you though, what is your favorite story that you remember about an experience with Dr. Reggie through his years? Because Dr. Reggie was known as one of the greatest speakers, one of the greatest philosophers and orators of the profession, in the history of the profession. What is one thing that comes to your mind through all those years?
1972, Davenport, Iowa. They put on a philosophy day at that time. Reggie was the first speaker in the morning. Sid was the last speaker in the afternoon. And every single hour, there was a new philosophy program going on. And that was the time that Reggie made that the speech was such that we put it on a video, on a disc. And that particular speech is still in practice, it's still around today. That's what it is. I think that was it. That was, I mean, I remember sitting there and thinking how incredible this talk is. And then when he got finished, I said, that one has to be saved. And he said that one. And yeah, everybody has it. I'm thinking here about the name, and I know it's an easy name, but it sometimes just escapes me at this time.
I do remember The Valley of the Blind was one of my favorite.
Thinking about.
Is that the
That was
yeah.
the Valley
Yeah.
of the, yeah. And it's people still write to me about that they picked up. There are people who still listen to it every morning. It was an incredible talk. I'm sure you've heard it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in fact, what I'll do is I'll actually link The Valley of the Blind because I know that's available on YouTube. So I will link that in the description below this podcast video.
Okay.
That's fantastic.
That was the most unbelievable. And it was the time that Palmer College was building a new auditorium at the time. But I don't think that didn't come until a year later, I think. But anyway, that's where it was, right at Palmer. There was no the other schools didn't exist, at that time. There was no Sherman, there was no Lifeguard, there was none of these new schools were there. The only school that was Palmer, right in the middle of the country.
So what now, in your opinion, of course, being in the education system, you're still teaching people. Now, even after your company's been sold, you still do it now I understand out of the goodness of your heart. What do you see and what is your opinion? Where do you think the school system for chiropractic needs to go?
Well, obviously, it needs to go back to the beginning, to what they originally started out to do, to teach the chiropractic philosophy. They have now incorporated all forms of medical treatment in so many of these schools that I think people don't spend the time to learn the chiropractic part. And it's easier to put them on a machine or give them something or easier to do that, it makes more money, all of that kind of thing. But you have to go back to the basics of why you're doing what you're doing. And you have to realize that education of that patient is vital. If this chiropractic profession is going to survive, it has to survive on a proper education. That's what I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would definitely agree. And that just actually spurred on a question. So do you remember the years of Dr. Reggie in practice? Would you say that his doctor's report was one of the most important things that he did in practice?
Well, you call it a doctor's report. I don't call it that. Okay? Every patient that came into that office had to come in and sit with me for an hour to learn what chiropractic was all about. Every patient. They would come in with their spouse and do that. Sometimes I even had entire families, like 7 or 8 people at one time, to educate them. Then, after they got under care, they had to come back again and bring somebody with them to have it stated all over again. And then once a year, we had a meeting of all the patients in a very, very big auditorium someplace, and another educational meeting. But to me, you had to continue to do that. People don't learn everything first time out. You know what I mean? They don't learn it in 3 years sometimes. They have to come out of school, go to a seminar and figure it out. So that's where I think this whole chiropractic lies, in the whole education.
And tell us a little bit, how big did that practice get when you were doing those orientations and Dr. Reggie was seeing patients? How big did that get?
You were open 7 days a week. Saturdays and Sundays only in the mornings, from 9 to 12, something like that. If we saw people, 100 people in a day, it was a slow day. That was a slow day. Okay? So we were into 1,000, 1,500, sometime for quite a while that we had that. Not just one chiropractor, there were others there as well. So it was a very small office, though. I mean, I don't think the thing was more than 700 square feet, the whole office. So, but we used the lounge inside for doing the orientations, took them into the house. Because on the ground floor, we had an area where we did all kinds of lectures.
This is fantastic. And so this is really important to me. And I'm so glad that you talked about this because as a coach, and I coach young chiropractors and I have the opportunity to do that. And I'm so privileged to be able to do that. But so many chiropractors graduate from school not even having an idea that that is even possible. So obviously, would you agree that the education system for those patients coming in is the most important thing that they could go through in the practice?
Patients, unless you educate them, that's not going to happen. They're going to find all kinds of excuses not to come. So, isn't that what kept you and I in it? The knowledge, right? So what makes you think other people don't also need that same knowledge to stay within this realm? Just makes sense to me.
Yeah, that's so fantastic. And so I would even say, and I'm sure you would agree that that is such an important factor in the school system now is helping students learn how to communicate that message.
Yes, and I think that should be part of their training. If you're going to go into a clinic and take care of patients, you ought to be able to give this kind of lecture to that patient before and after and in between times. And that should be part of the educational program, how to do that lecture. When I was at Sherman, that was a vital part of our program.
That's amazing. So what is in store for Dr. Irene? What are the next steps for you? I know you're retired, but you're still as busy as anybody I know in the profession. What do you foresee in the future for you?
I know. I take one day at a time. I don't know. I'm 89 years old. I know I'm not going to live to be 189. So I have to do the things that I like doing. I'm living in a independent facility now. I'm not living in a regular home anymore. So I have old people. There's lots of old people all over the place. They're in wheelchairs. They're in everything. But I have my own private villa. I didn't want to be with all of those people in a ring. I have a private entrance. I can walk outside. I can walk, do my exercise every day. I have nothing, and I have a couple of parking spaces out in front. People can come and visit, so that I can get to teach them. I mean, that's what I like to do. And everybody, some people like to play cards. Some people like to do stuff. I don't. I want to be with chiropractic people because I'd have nothing in common with anybody else. The only people I kind of have in common with my family. I have my sister lives here too in the same community, but she's a socializer, not me.
Oh, that's great. And so how often now do you get your spine checked?
Every week, once or twice a week, depending upon if I'm available. Or sometimes if my chiropractor goes out of town, I can't get there. But I'm at least once a week and twice if I can do it.
That's amazing. Well, you are the picture of chiropractic philosophy, Dr. Irene. I can't thank you enough for your time this morning. This has been so delightful for me.
Well, it's been nice seeing you again. At least I got to see your face. Now I remember what you look like.
Yes, likewise, likewise. Well, I certainly enjoy our time together and I wish you all the best. And thank you so much again for being on the podcast.
My pleasure. And I enjoy the fact that you are going to go ahead and take the word of chiropractic and pass it on, because that's the most important thing. You have a lot more years left to do it in. I don't.
Thank you, Dr. Irene. Thank you.